Mister, I don't know what you think is going on here, but I sell a service. Now, if you want the service, you pay what I think it's worth. If you...
A private eye who kept a printing press in his car, a theme song that became a top 10 hit, and an actor whose injuries literally forced a show off the air. The Rockford Files was anything but a typical detective series. From a multi-million-dollar lawsuit exposing Hollywood's shadiest accounting practices to 122 unique answering machine messages that drove writers crazy, Jim Rockford's world was filled with secrets as fascinating as any case he solved. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about the Rockford Files. Fact 1. Garner's injuries actually ended the show. Most television shows end because of declining ratings or network decisions. But the Rockford Files came to a halt for a much more painful reason. James Garner's body simply gave out. Unlike most leading men of his era, Garner insisted on performing nearly all of his own stunts throughout the show's 6-season run, and that decision came with a devastating physical cost. Every fist fight, every chase sequence, every time Rockford got knocked around by bad guys, that was Garner himself taking the hits. The constant jumping, rolling, and brawling on hard pavement absolutely destroyed his knees and back over the years. What makes this even more remarkable is that Garner had a knee injury dating back to his National Guard days, and the demanding production schedule only made it worse with each passing season. He underwent knee surgery during every single hiatus for 5 consecutive years, but the 3-month breaks between seasons simply were not enough time for proper recovery. By late 1979, Garner was also hospitalized with a bleeding ulcer on top of everything else. His doctors finally put their foot down and ordered him to take extended time off to recuperate, and when Garner informed NBC that he could not continue filming due to his health, the network made the decision to cancel the show mid-season. The final season was cut short at just 12 episodes instead of the usual 22 or more. Some reports suggested the show had become too expensive to produce anyway, but the undeniable truth was that Garner had literally worn himself out for the role. He later admitted that doing his own stunts had been a mistake that took a severe toll on his quality of life for years afterward. Fact 2. The theme song was a Grammy-winning hit television theme. Songs rarely become standalone hits on the radio, but the instrumental theme for the Rockford Files managed to climb all the way to number 10 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1975. Composers Mike Post and Pete Carpenter created something truly special with this piece, blending a bluesy harmonica solo with electric guitar, a dobro, and what Post described as a chamber group on steroids featuring 2 flutes, 2 French horns, and 2 trombones. Perhaps most significantly, the theme prominently featured a Minimoog synthesizer, making it one of the first popular songs to showcase this new technology. That would eventually reshape music production. The song stayed on the charts for an impressive 16 weeks and also reached number 8 in Canada, while becoming a top 20 adult contemporary hit in both countries. The Recording Academy recognized the achievement by awarding Post and Carpenter the Grammy for Best Instrumental Arrangement in 1975. Post later recalled the moment he knew the theme had truly broken through. He was driving on the Hollywood freeway with his windows down when he noticed a man in a Corvette next to him cranking up the same radio station. Both cars were playing his record at full volume, and the stranger gave him an enthusiastic thumbs up without having any idea he was sitting next to the composer himself. Post considered telling him thank you, but decided against it, thinking that would be ridiculous since the man had no clue who he was. The full-length single was released under Mike Post's name alone because Pete Carpenter, who was 60 years old at the time, wanted no part of the public attention that would come with a hit record. Fact 3. The writers ran out of answering machine ideas. Every single episode of the Rockford Files opened the exact same way. The phone would ring, the answering machine would play Jim Rockford's outgoing message, and then some random caller would leave a message that was usually funny and completely unrelated to the plot. This clever little gimmick became one of the most beloved aspects of the show, giving viewers a quick glimpse into Rockford's messy personal life before the story even began. Creditors demanding payment, women wondering why he never called back, old acquaintances asking for favors. These brief recordings painted a picture of a man who was always slightly behind on his bills and obligations. The problem was that the show ran for 6 seasons and 122 episodes, which meant the writers had to come up with 122 different amusing messages. That may not sound like much, but try coming up with over 100 unique jokes that all follow the exact same format, and you will understand why the creative team eventually hit a wall. After churning out dozens of these openings, the writers simply ran out of ideas and started asking anyone on set for help. Secretaries, crew members, and various staff were all solicited for suggestions to fill the answering machine slots. Sometimes these messages were written at the very last minute before an episode aired, with writers scrambling to come up with something passable. The messages became such an iconic part of the show that fans have compiled complete lists of every single one, and some 1970s celebrities reportedly provided voice work for various callers over the years. What started as a clever storytelling device eventually became something of a burden, though audiences never seemed to notice or care about the behind-the-scenes struggle. Fact 4, Tom Selleck's role led directly to Magnum P.I. Before Tom Selleck became one of television's biggest stars wearing Hawaiian shirts in Hawaii, he appeared on the Rockford Files as a character specifically designed to drive Jim Rockford absolutely crazy. Selleck played Lance White, a fellow private investigator who was impossibly perfect in every conceivable way. Handsome, charming, impeccably dressed, and blessed with ridiculous luck that allowed him to solve cases through pure coincidence rather than actual detective work. The character was essentially a parody of traditional television private eyes, the kind of hero who could do no wrong while everyone around them fell over themselves to help. Rockford, who had to scrape and struggle for every piece of information, could barely contain his frustration watching Lance stumble into success at every turn. Selleck appeared in 2 episodes during the show's later seasons, and his performance caught the attention of network executives who saw real leading man potential in the young actor. The following year, Selleck was cast as Thomas Magnum in Magnum P.I., which would become one of the most popular shows of the 1980s. In a nice bit of continuity, the theme song for Magnum P.I. was composed by the same duo who created the Rockford Files theme, Mike Post and Pete Carpenter. The connection between the 2 shows did not go unnoticed by fans, and Magnum P.I. even paid tribute to its predecessor in a 1987 episode where characters discussed the Rockford Files and poked fun at the Lance White character. Selleck himself was initially hesitant about the Magnum role because he worried it would feel too similar to Lance White, but he ultimately made the character distinctly his own. Fact 5. David Chase created a Sopranos prototype. Here. Long before Tony Soprano sat down with his therapist and changed television forever, David Chase spent years working on the Rockford Files and developing the storytelling skills that would eventually make him famous. Chase joined the show as a writer in 1976 and remained involved in various capacities for more than 4 years, writing and producing nearly 24 episodes during that time. The experience was absolutely crucial to his development as a television creator, teaching him how to craft character-driven stories with psychological depth and moral complexity. What many fans do not realize is that Chase actually created a proto-Sopranos right there on the Rockford Files, nearly 2 decades before HBO picked up his pitch. In 1979, Chase wrote an episode called Just a Couple of Guys that served as a backdoor pilot for a potential spin-off series about two wannabe gangsters from New Jersey trying to make names for themselves in the mob. The episode featured characters hiding bodies in restaurant freezers, dealing with mob bosses, and navigating the complicated world of organized crime, themes that would become central to The Sopranos 20 years later. The spin-off was never picked up, but Chase never forgot his time on the Rockford Files. When The Sopranos finally premiered in 1999, Chase included a subtle tribute to the show that helped shape his career. In a first-season episode, residents of a retirement home are shown watching television, and though the picture cannot be seen, the unmistakable Rockford Files theme music plays in the background. It was a small acknowledgement of where Chase's journey as a television writer truly began. Fact 6. Rockford kept a printing press in his car. Jim Rockford was not your typical television detective, and one of the most unusual tools of his trade was something no other private eye had ever thought to carry. A portable printing press stashed in the back seat of his gold Pontiac Firebird. The device was a Sigwalt No. 11 letterpress, a small but functional machine that allowed Rockford to print fake business cards on the spot whenever he needed to assume a new identity. This was genuinely innovative for television at the time, as no one had ever seen a detective character equipped with such a practical tool for deception. Rockford used his printing press throughout the series to create credentials for his various aliases and scams, most famously posing as insurance investigators and government officials under the recurring pseudonym Jim Taggart. The character's investigative style relied heavily on deception and fast talking rather than violence, and having the ability to produce convincing business cards in minutes gave him a significant advantage when trying to get information out of reluctant witnesses. The show actually depicted Rockford setting up the letterpress and arranging the type, though sharp-eyed viewers noticed some inconsistencies. In one scene, he is shown using small type that would be appropriate for text, but the resulting card features larger display lettering. There was even an episode where the gimmick backfired when someone pulled out one of Rockford's freshly printed cards and noticed the ink had not dried properly, exposing his cover story. The printing press became such an iconic part of the character that fans of the show have sought out the same model Sigwalt presses to include in their own Rockford Files collections and car displays at classic automobile shows. Fact 7. Garner sued Universal for $22.5 million. The Rockford Files made enormous amounts of money for Universal Studios through syndication deals and foreign sales, but James Garner believed he was being cheated out of his rightful share. According to his contract, Garner's production company, Cherokee Productions, was entitled to 37.5% of the net profits from the show. But Universal's accounting told a very different story. Despite the show's obvious commercial success, the studio's ledgers somehow claimed that the Rockford Files was operating at a deficit of $9 million after 5 seasons and 100 episodes. Garner found this impossible to believe and began digging into the production records, where he discovered what he considered outright fraud. In a memorable interview, he claimed that Universal's books showed the production had purchased the same car 4 separate times, a clear sign of what would become known as creative accounting. In 1983, Garner filed a lawsuit against Universal, seeking $22.5 million in damages, alleging fraud, deceit, and breach of contract. He claimed that his company had only received around $250,000 despite gross revenues of $119 million. The legal battle dragged on for 6 years before both sides reached a confidential settlement in 1989, just before the case was scheduled to go to trial. Garner had previously turned down a $6 million offer from Universal, and after signing the final agreement, he told reporters he could live with the deal and live very comfortably. The lawsuit helped expose Hollywood's practice of manipulating accounting to avoid paying profit participants, making Garner something of a pioneer for actors' rights in an industry that often took advantage of its talent. Fact 8. The Firebird was secretly a Formula 400. Jim Rockford was supposed to be a struggling private investigator who could barely make ends meet, so his car had to reflect that modest financial situation. James Garner chose a Pontiac Firebird Esprit for the character specifically because it was a mid-range model that someone in Rockford's circumstances might realistically afford. Not flashy like the high-performance Trans Am, but respectable enough for a working professional. The problem was that the Esprit's standard engine and suspension simply could not handle the demanding chase sequences and stunt work required for the show. To solve this dilemma, Pontiac's public relations team and the production worked together on a clever solution. They started with Firebird Formula 400s, which came equipped with much more powerful engines, upgraded front and rear anti-roll bars, stiffer springs, and heavy-duty shocks. Then they stripped away all the performance indicators, removing the twin-scoop hood, the rear spoiler, the side vents, and all the formula badging, and replaced them with Esprit components to create a wolf in sheep's clothing. The result was a car that looked like an affordable, everyday vehicle but had the guts to perform spectacular stunts. Pontiac supplied 3 new Firebirds for each season of filming, typically including a hero car kept pristine for close-up shots, an action car for chase sequences, and a stunt car for scenes involving jumps or crashes. Sharp-eyed car enthusiasts watching the show could sometimes spot the dual exhaust tips and rear anti-roll bar that revealed the car's true Formula heritage. General Motors actually saw increased Firebird sales because of the show's popularity, similar to the boost the Trans Am would receive from Smokey and the Bandit just a few years later. Fact 9. Garner refused the 1979 model's new face. James Garner was not just the star of the Rockford Files. He was deeply invested in every aspect of the production, including exactly which car his character would drive. For most of the show's run, Pontiac provided updated Firebirds each season so that viewers would see the current year's styling during broadcasts. This arrangement worked smoothly through the 1978 model year, but when Pontiac redesigned the Firebird's front end for 1979, Garner put his foot down. He simply did not like the new look and refused to drive it on camera. Rather than argue with their star, the production agreed to continue using a 1978 model for the remaining seasons, which meant the same basic car appeared from 1978 through the show's cancellation in 1980. Because General Motors often changed their paint colors slightly from year to year, the production team had to repaint the car each season to maintain the consistent Denver gold color that had become Rockford's signature. This attention to visual continuity was somewhat ironic given how casually the show otherwise treated car consistency. Fans have noted that damage visible in one scene would mysteriously disappear in the next, and different year models sometimes appeared within the same episode due to sloppy editing of chase footage. After the series ended, Garner actually kept one of the 1978 Firebirds, specifically the sound car that had been wired with microphones throughout the interior and exterior to capture audio during filming. He drove that particular vehicle himself until mid-1981 before passing it along to subsequent owners, and it was eventually restored and sold at auction for $115,000 in 2019. Fact 10. Stuart Margolin won 2 Emmys as Angel. Every great television detective needs a troublesome friend who constantly drags them into problems, and for Jim Rockford, that friend was Evelyn Angel Martin, a scheming, lying, cowardly con artist played with absolute perfection by Stuart Margolin. Angel had been Rockford's cellmate during his time at San Quentin Prison, and despite being completely untrustworthy, he somehow remained in Jim's orbit throughout the entire series. Angel's harebrained schemes and desperate situations provided both comic relief and genuine complications for Rockford's cases, and Margolin brought such warmth and humanity to this fundamentally rotten character that audiences could not help but love him. James Garner himself admitted in his memoir that he never quite understood why Rockford liked Angel so much, since the character was essentially rotten to the core, but he credited Margolin entirely for making Angel somehow lovable despite his many flaws. The Television Academy agreed, awarding Margolin consecutive Emmy Awards for Outstanding Supporting Actor in a Drama Series in 1979 and 1980. This remarkable achievement placed Margolin in extremely exclusive company. He became one of only 5 actors in television history to win this particular award twice for playing the same character. Margolin's connection with Garner actually predated the Rockford Files by several years. The two had worked together on Garner's earlier series, Nichols, in the early 1970s, where Margolin played a similarly shifty character. When the Rockford Files was being developed, the show's producer and creator, Stephen J. Cannell, specifically approached Margolin to bring that same energy to the new series. Margolin would reprise the Angel character in all 8 of the Rockford Files television movies produced during the 1990s, decades after the original show ended. Fact 11. The license plate was a hidden in-joke. Jim Rockford's gold Pontiac Firebird became one of the most recognizable cars in television history, and careful viewers may have noticed that his California license plate always read 853 OKG. What most people did not realize was that this seemingly random combination of numbers and letters was actually a coded tribute to James Garner himself, created by the show's executive producer, Meta Rosenberg, as a personal touch. The letters OKG stood for Oklahoma Garner, combining the actor's birth state with his last name in a playful abbreviation. The numbers 853 represented August 1953, the month and year when Garner landed his very first acting job and began his long career in entertainment. Unfortunately, when the art department first created the prop license plate, they misread the instructions and produced a plate reading OKG 835 instead of 853 OKG. This error appeared in some early episodes before being corrected, and sharp-eyed fans have documented exactly which scenes feature the incorrect plate number. The license plate became so closely associated with the character that Garner could never forget it, even years after the show ended. Fans who followed the series closely considered the plate an integral part of Rockford's identity, right alongside his trailer home and his distinctive car. The personal nature of the joke reflected the close relationship between Garner and his production team at Cherokee Productions, the company he had formed with partners Meta Rosenberg and Juanita Bartlett. This kind of hidden detail demonstrated the care and thought that went into every aspect of the Rockford Files, even the small elements that most viewers would never consciously notice. Fact 12, Isaac Hayes and Louis Gossett Jr. almost got a spin-off. The Rockford Files had such a rich universe of supporting characters that the producers attempted multiple times to launch spin-off series featuring various guest stars. One of the most intriguing failed attempts would have paired 2 Academy Award winners in a buddy detective show that never made it past the pilot stage. Isaac Hayes, the legendary musician best known for the Shaft theme, played Gandolf Gandy Fitch, a short-tempered former cellmate of Rockford's who served as the muscle in any confrontation. Louis Gossett Jr., who would later win an Oscar for An Officer and a Gentleman, played Marcus Aurelius Gabby Hayes, a fast-talking former parole officer turned private investigator who could con his way through almost any situation. The 2 characters came together in a 1977 episode called Just Another Polish Wedding, which was designed as a backdoor pilot for a proposed series called Gabby and Gandy. The premise had the mismatched pair teaming up after Rockford introduced them, with their opposing personalities creating both comedic friction and effective crime-solving chemistry. Gandy got his nickname for Gabby because the smooth-talking Hayes spoke at what seemed like 75 miles per hour, never pausing for breath. Despite the promising dynamic between the 2 performers and their established chemistry, NBC ultimately passed on picking up the series. Hayes returned for one more Rockford Files episode after the failed pilot, this time paired with music icon Dionne Warwick as his love interest. The episode remains a fascinating glimpse at what might have been one of television's first shows headlined by two African-American leads in the detective genre. Fact 13. The trailer location changed. After Season 1, Jim Rockford's beat-up mobile home sitting on the beach became one of the most iconic television residences of the 1970s, perfectly capturing the character's modest circumstances and unconventional lifestyle. However, fans who pay close attention to the early episodes will notice that the trailer was not always in the same spot. During the first season of filming, Rockford's home was parked in a crowded parking lot directly alongside Pacific Coast Highway at address 22878, right next to a popular Malibu establishment called the Tonga Lei Restaurant and Lounge. This location put the trailer right on the main road, which was actually quite different from the more secluded beach setting that most viewers remember. After the first season, the production moved the trailer to Paradise Cove, giving it the fictional address of 29 Cove Road in Malibu. This new location placed Rockford adjacent to a pier and a restaurant called the Sand Castle, creating the classic setup that would define the show for the remaining 5 seasons. The real-world address is 28128 Pacific Coast Highway, though the property sits down a private road right on the ocean front, rather than directly on the highway itself. The Sand Castle eventually became known as the Paradise Cove Beach Cafe, and devoted fans still make pilgrimages to the location decades after the show went off the air. The parking lot where Rockford's trailer once sat has been transformed over the years, with part of it now converted to a sandy beach area with tables for cafe customers. While the original trailer is long gone, the location remains a popular destination for anyone who wants to stand where Jim Rockford once lived and worked. Fact 14. The Rockford turn became a real driving term. James Garner loved cars and loved driving, and his enthusiasm for automotive action was one of the main reasons he agreed to star in the Rockford Files in the first place. Throughout the show's run, Garner performed his own stunt driving whenever possible, and his signature move became so famous that it entered the vocabulary of drivers everywhere. The maneuver, which Garner learned from moonshiners who used it to escape pursuing law enforcement, involved a specific sequence of actions that looked incredibly impressive on screen. As Garner explained in his autobiography, you start by driving straight in reverse at about 35 miles per hour. Then come off the gas pedal, turn the steering wheel hard to the left, and pull the emergency brake. This combination locks the rear wheels and throws the front end of the car around in a rapid 180-degree spin. You then release everything, hit the gas, and take off in the opposite direction from where you started. The technique is technically known as a J-turn and was commonly employed as an evasive driving maneuver by the Secret Service and others who needed to make quick escapes. However, because of Garner's repeated use of the move on the Rockford Files, it became widely known as a Rockford turn, or simply pulling a Rockford among professional drivers and car enthusiasts. Garner stated in interviews for the first season DVD release that he performed this stunt himself throughout the entire run of the series. The constant execution of such demanding maneuvers contributed significantly to the physical toll that the show took on his body, but it also helped create some of the most memorable car action sequences of 1970s television. Fact 15. Gretchen Corbett wet her pants, riding with Garner. Gretchen Corbett played attorney Beth Davenport, Jim Rockford's lawyer and occasional love interest, for the first 4 seasons of the Rockford Files. The character frequently got pulled into Rockford's dangerous cases, which meant Corbett sometimes found herself in the passenger seat during the show's famous car chase sequences. According to author Ed Robertson, who wrote extensively about the series, Corbett's very first driving scene with James Garner turned out to be far more intense than she had anticipated. She knew that Garner was a good driver. Everyone on set talked about his skills behind the wheel. But knowing something intellectually and experiencing it firsthand are two very different things. The scene called for sudden hairpin turns, the kind of aggressive maneuvering that Garner had perfected over years of racing and stunt driving. Corbett was completely unprepared for just how skilled and how fast Garner actually was, and the violent changes in direction threw her around the car in ways she had never experienced before. When the cameras finally stopped rolling and the scene was complete, Corbett discovered to her embarrassment that she had been so terrified during the driving that she had actually wet her pants. The story became a bit of behind-the-scenes lore that illustrated just how seriously Garner took his stunt driving and how realistic those chase sequences actually were. Corbett remained on the show for 4 seasons before departing due to a contract dispute between the producers and Universal Studios, which held her contract as a contract player. She never returned to the original series, though the Beth Davenport character was referenced in the later television movies.